Welcome to NAT. My name is Paul Spanos, and today we have with us again the clinical counselor, Harry Malos.
Thank you, Paul.
Welcome to this hour with us. Today's topic is low self-esteem and how this can be explained. Low self-esteem is quite common in our society. It's not something, it is in every household, I would say, and attacks every age. But how does this work? How can we explain? How can we start this?
Yeah, well, that's a good question to a very prevalent subject in society today, Paul, that we struggle with low self-esteem, with self-worth. We feel bad about ourselves, we feel incapable, and as a result, we hear tragedies, and many tragedies, even so recently that we heard the death of Robin Williams, who died because of depression and because he felt so unhappy with himself, and we hear things like that. So it is a very prevalent issue in our society today.
Because we're talking about low self-esteem, doesn't sound very big, but when it leads to depression in such a way, like take your life. Yes, it is heavy.
Yeah, and I think, look, one way of explaining it is our early experiences in life.
Okay.
Early childhood experiences. We can look at it that way, and what happens when a child is not nurtured correctly, is not nurtured positively, I should say, when criticism is addressed to them unfairly, when they are accused of not performing, they obviously have low self-esteem build up. And how it works is that in order to be able to actually deal with the criticism, to adapt with the criticism in early age, what we do in order to cope is create a false self, as psychology suggests. And that false self is identified with all the criticisms that are thrown towards a young individual, and we do that in order to cope. Because
that means when I'm a child and I've got that negative criticism, you're lazy, you don't cope, you can't do this and that. That means I create another self within me.
Yes.
With all of that as part of my cognitive behavior, or accept that as such.
As part of a coping behavior.
Coping behavior.
Okay. It's how, I guess, if whether you believe in God or not, it is there for a purpose, and if it wasn't there, the individual would be so overwhelmed and that he would not be able to survive.
That means in this case, that coping behavior, I escape into this. When it
is a form of an escape, but it's more of coping, because all these things that are dealt towards that individual are too overwhelming. So our brain structure creates another false self of ourselves in order to take all that criticism. Okay. So all that criticism is towards that false self that makes me separate towards that. So the problem, that's a good thing as a coping mechanism, but the problem is as we grow older and we keep feeding the false self, we identify ourselves through the false self.
And do we use that false self as an excuse?
Not as an excuse, as a way to cope.
As a way to cope? With what? How can we put an example to this, to cope with what? If somebody has negative reinforcing to me all these ideas about myself, and I have put it into this, how can I use as a coping mechanism this self?
In order to adjust, and in order to actually live your life, you need to assess what has been said to you in order to move on. So we assess it by identifying it with a self that represents all those criticisms.
Okay.
See how it works? But the problem is that...
That means I have accepted them in some degree.
Yes. It's not only is it accepted, but it becomes so powerful that it represents us. It no longer represents who we truly are, but who we are as a false self.
That means in this case I fall into the trap, believing that criticism as something real in me, but in reality is not the reality for me.
Yeah, which it's not the true person.
It's not the true person.
It's a false person. And you know, there's a difference between who we are and what we are.
Okay, can we talk about this?
Yeah, sure. What we are is when we refer to someone, what a thief he is, what a liar he is. This is caused by their behaviour and their actions. But who we are is something more special than that. Who we are is our true identity that no longer is represented because we've built up this false image of ourselves through the criticism.
That means I might steal things, but who I really am, I believe this is a theft, and even though I do steal, but at the same time, inside me, I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
As my other self.
Yes. My true identity is different to what I do.
Is my belief system?
Yeah. My true identity is that I have a special purpose in life. I am created for a purpose, and I have hope, and I have love, and I have all these things. But the false self, who represents us, is represented by all the criticism that we've received.
That means, can we say that false criticism or negative criticism?
Negative criticism.
Okay. That really steals opportunities for my real purpose in life.
That's right. And it creates a downcast society. It creates a society who don't believe in themselves, but believe that they're incapable of experiencing a good life. They're incapable of performing good traits. They believe that the only traits that they can perform are negative traits because they're represented by this false self-image.
That is very, very interesting to move on from that after the break. Please stay with us. We'll be back after the short break. Welcome back to NAT. With us is Harry Malos, the clinical counselor, and the topic today is how self-esteem affects our lives and causes and results because of the self-esteem being low. Harry, welcome back. Let's talk about the low self-esteem. It means that I am a normal person, and I do things, and people have a certain really good perception about me.
Yeah.
But my perception about me is completely different.
That's a perfect analogy. People around you, can see your good trait, can see your worth, can see that you perform well at work, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a sportsman. They can see the good things in you.
And they can see the skills that I've got.
Yeah, based on the truth.
Yes.
They can see it.
And what is it that blocks my mind for me to see that?
Because we're not represented by our true trait. We're represented by an image that we created that was in order to cope in early life.
That means, in this case, I focus into that self that we're talking about.
That's
before.
right, the false self. Let me give you a simple explanation. If I know that you are an Australian citizen,
yes,
but you think you are of Asian background, yes, and I said you're Australian, and you say, no, I'm Asian. Because that's who represents you.
Okay.
This other false self that you have grown up to accept as yourself in order to cope.
And that means if that false self, it's full of the negative criticism against me when I grew up, I just carry that.
Yeah, it's exactly what happens. And that's the problem. Although it is there for us to cope in early childhood, it becomes so powerful that we identify only in that. And anything else anybody else says that's positive, we don't believe, we don't accept.
That means I might do wonderful things,
yes,
but to me, I'm still on that false criticism that's been done to me by people who they didn't even know how to be positive with me.
Yeah, those who have labelled you that way, yes.
Okay.
Those
that means labeling is part of the things that we...
Yes. Look, when a child is labelled in a negative way, it just can't. It's overwhelmed. It doesn't know what to do with it.
Does this explain a lot of suicide, low self-esteem amongst the girls and females, believe that they're not pretty or something, or?
Yes, well, when it comes to that type of thing, yes, girls are affected a little bit more. I think it's in terms of the looks and so on. Yeah. Yes, but generally low self-esteem occurs to both genders, and not just to male and female. It occurs to both. Okay. We just don't see the goodness that we have, the traits that we have. We're incapable of seeing. I treat a lot of my clients because they have low self-esteem of themselves. They don't feel special.
And that trait comes from their childhood as well.
It's generally, it begins there. It begins as a coping mechanism from early childhood experience.
It means that brings another problem within the family. Even though I believe that my child does not behave well, I have to be very, very careful how to label that behavior, isn't it?
Well, yes, it's true, and it's an awareness and the truth comes in. Okay. Because we're not saying to pretend that you are good because that's your true identity.
Okay.
We are saying look at your facts of what your true identity and focus on that, not on an image that you've created in order to protect yourself.
Okay.
So if you're a child who has been getting good to average marks, but you think that your marks are in a negative way, that you think you're no good, well, we dispute that by saying, well, if you're not good, how come you're always passing?
Yes, that's right. Yes. Okay, that means we can. But before we go into the remedies, it's going to be the third section. But I would like to focus. What's the implication of low self-esteem? If we can put sort of a range of things that can happen to me if I sustain this low self-esteem.
Well, we fall into depression.
Okay.
And that's the danger of people with low self-esteem. They fall into a depressive state that's very difficult to turn around.
It means everything is negative around.
Everything is negative. We're stuck in a hole that we're not worthwhile. Our self-worth is diminished. So what am I doing living? I might as well put an end to this misery and this miserable life that I have.
Now, if I feel negative about myself and I have low self-esteem, how do I see others?
Well, that's a very good point, because usually people with low self-esteem, in order to communicate with other people, because remember, low self-esteem is down low and the other people are above them, they actually become very critical towards others because they can't communicate from this difference. So I would try and bring you down. I would criticize you. If I have low self-esteem, I will look at you in a negative way and be verbally critical with you, so I can bring you down to my level so we can talk.
That's why depressive people and depressive behavior is not very attractive, isn't it?
Well, true. Yes, it's low self-esteem people usually are very critical people,
and that is why it's not easy for them even to make friends and to socialize.
That's
in
correct.
A normal.
It's because they can't associate or they can't relate to them.
Yeah. That means you can see the impact of low self-esteem is really pretty much into the social life, our behavior, and also how the environment is receptive to us or not.
That's correct. Low self-esteem people are usually not very social. They are confined in their own premises. They don't like going out. They don't like socializing because they think that if they socialize, people will see what they feel about themselves.
I mean, can we relate this on to Robin Williams' case that it was pretty much everywhere in the media, that himself was in a deep depression, while I would say 7 billion people around the globe adored him.
Yeah. So that's a perfect example of someone with low self-esteem who identifies themselves from a false self perspective.
Okay.
There's so much evidence to suggest that he had so much skill. He brought so much laughter to people. He was worthwhile, yet he didn't see that. Let's
talk about some remedies or ways of getting away from that low self-esteem.
Yeah.
When we come back after the break. Thanks for being with us. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us with Harry Malos, the clinical counselor, and today's topic is about low self-esteem. Let's talk about, is there any possibility or any pathways for me to step away from this negative way of the low self-esteem?
Yes, there is. There is. It's a process of a counselling process where the individual becomes aware of the way they behave, how they're represented, and giving them certain skills and challenging their irrational thoughts about what they think of themselves that doesn't truly identify who they are.
That means psychology or counseling, I would say, helps me with low self-esteem to identify that behavior in itself that I have chosen.
Yes. You didn't quite choose it. It became necessary for you in order to cope. It wasn't like I choose to be low self-esteem because I don't think they enjoy it being low self-esteem.
Right.
It's just that is what happened in order for them to cope.
And somehow it's a trap in life to create that false self, isn't it?
That's right. It is a trap. It's a coping way, but it is a trap because it represents us, and we can't step out of it because we don't believe what everybody else sees. We only believe what we think and feel about ourselves.
Now, how emotionally I can accept that I'm trapped, or the thinking process what is the first mechanism of my thinking to step away from my perception?
Well, firstly, you become aware of it, and then you identify. A counsellor will gently identify the things that you've achieved. Will challenge the irrational thoughts of your negativity. Will base it on truth, and it's a process where you actually identify all the things that you've achieved, and how did they come to be when you don't think yourself that special or incapable of doing these things. So it's a slow process of identifying positive action and positive traits in the person.
That means you turn on the light to the area that I shut down the light.
Well, that's a simple way of looking, and I think that's what we do. Yes.
Yeah, and so for me to begin to think, I think about myself this way, but this is not only me. I've got some other stuff in there that I don't pay attention somehow.
Exactly. So we say, tell me, what evidence do you have that you think you're such a failure?
Okay, that's a good point. What evidence there?
Yeah. And as the opposite of that is there any evidence to suggest that you've actually have performed well, that you are coping well, that you are contributing well, that you have made a difference in a positive way to your family, to your society, to your loved ones, as a father, as a mother, as a brother, or as a sister.
Okay.
You've contributed, and everybody else agrees with it and thinks so. So we challenge that with foundations of truth.
Can we identify that departure from my false self, negative false self, as a mechanism that can describe as forgiveness of my negative beliefs about me? Or because really forgiveness comes down to the things that I believe I'm in the wrong way, or I do things the wrong way.
Yeah. And I think what you're trying to say is that it's very difficult for people with low self-esteem to forgive themselves.
Exactly that.
Yeah, because it's so true with that false identity that they can't see it any other way.
Yes.
So it's difficult to forgive myself for being the way I am.
Yes.
So I'd rather choose to stay that because it makes me comfortable.
Yes. And also, if it is difficult to forgive, it's difficult to forgive others as a
much more difficult.
Much more difficult for that. Yeah. Because you blame everybody else for the position you're into, and you feel comfortable in that position.
Yes. So it's a way that I've got a safety zone here. This is where I feel most comfortable, and I recognise myself as that person.
For the benefit of the viewers, what would be the first steps when I recognise that something is wrong with my perception of myself? and I've got low self-esteem, what would be my first thinking of begin just to find the pathway out of it?
Well, learning to trust people, learning to trust people that are close to you and people who care about you, learning to trust their opinion and their evaluation rather than yours is a good starting point, where you actually are listening to someone who can evaluate you differently to what you do, and you actually trust their opinion.
But in that case, a little bit of a dispute, I would say, because somebody can talk to things about you and you feel upset because really what they say about you is pretty much, they miss the point, and you feel that this person really doesn't know me, so I cannot trust this person. Isn't it a way to say that to find people that you are able to trust them?
Well, yes, it's true, because people you trust, you know, and they've been part of your life, and they've experienced the truth about you. So you cannot trust someone you don't know, because they don't know you.
Especially people who love you, really, it's a good starting point.
Yes,
I suppose.
yes. It's a good trust, and you need to start with trust.
Yeah.
And then there are other developmental skills that you can acquire as you go from trust to actually fulfilling and disputing that identity that you've created in order to survive.
Very quickly, the first is recognizing things in me, in that behavior. And the second thing, what is the tool that as a counselor use for me to begin to build?
Yeah, well, we challenge the belief system that suggests that you're no good.
Okay, so I begin to build a new belief system about myself.
That's correct.
Building on the reality that other people see and things that I can do or I'm capable of doing.
And it's good. I'm glad you said reality. As counsellors, we don't give hope on false pretense. It is on reality.
Right.
We write down, tell me some of the things that you've achieved. Tell me some of the things that you've done. And once they've identified with these things, then we say, well, I can see there's a lot of things in there that you don't feel about yourself.
I mean, refocusing on my real purpose in life rather than the false self.
Refocusing on the truth about who you are.
Excellent closing.
Yeah.
Excellent. This is the time we've got for today. Thank you, Harry, for being with us again. We're going to call you again. We have some interesting topics. Thank you for being with us. See you next week, same time.